I think it's about time we have an important conversation. I've talked about this in passing before, but I think it deserves its own video because I'm seeing a lot of people genuinely believing that guitars, just in general, are good investments. Yeah. In most cases, I'll say guitars are actually terrible financial investments. They're great investments in making music, of course. Investments in having fun, absolutely. But financial investments? And I do get why people think they are. You know, I did a Google search before this video and I found that most of the advice is coming from guitar stores. Not biased at all there, are we? And a perfect example of this is Kevin O'Leary's video on YouTube. It's the most viewed video about guitars being investments, 600,000 views, and there's stuff like this being said.
And that's a brand new guitar, 5,000 to 7,000 sort of range.
Yeah.
And then if I held on to it for 10 years, it would be worth more than I paid for it.
It will maintain, or it will be worth more, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it's worth, so that's sort of the entry-level price for an investment-grade guitar.
Yes.
I mean, where do I even start with that? For one, a guitar store telling you without a shadow of a doubt, just 100% certainty that a guitar is going to hold its value or it's going to be worth more is crazy. But then add on to that it's pure speculation based on the market in 10 years time. That's insane. I mean, the guitars that they're talking about are Gibson R8s and R9s. They're the reissue 1958 and 1959 from the Gibson Custom Shop. Now, Gibson have been doing those for at least a few decades now. And that means that you can look at R8s and R9s from close enough to 10 years ago. I found one that is from 2016, so officially 8 years old, but I mean, in a few weeks it'll be classed as 9 years old. So we've got a 9-year-old Gibson R8 for sale. And here it is. I think it looks quite good, looks to be in very good condition, looked after guitar. And if you were to buy this from Gibson in 2016, it's the standard historic 1958, it would cost $4,699 US. Roughly adjusted for inflation, that would be $6,176 today. The guitar is being sold for $3,245. That means that Gibson R8 has lost 48% of its value over the last almost 9 years. Sounds like a bad investment to me.
It will maintain, or it will be worth more, yes.
Now, of course, people also believe that guitars are good investments because, one, it's the number one lie to the less than supportive spouse. Yeah, I bought another guitar, honey, but don't worry because it's a great investment. But at the same time, some people believe that guitars are good investments because a few years ago, the market did change quite a bit. Back during the lockdowns, no one was doing anything, so everyone started to play guitar. People wanted to buy guitars, there was a huge demand. Demand went up, but the supply was quite low, because all the factories, they were closed. So the second-hand market back a few years ago was a great time to be a seller. But that's changed. Now the demand has gone down, and the supply is absolutely huge. There are so many guitars out there, you can get great deals. It's a great time to be a buyer now. But for some reason, the belief that guitars are good investments, you can just buy a guitar, flip it, and you'll make money on it, is somewhat still there. That's just not the case anymore. It hasn't been for a while. But today, I thought I'd talk a little bit about guitars as investments, because there are examples of guitars being great investments, and guitars being just not very good investments at all. Personally, if you ask me, I don't believe that they're good financial investments, full stop, because they're instruments. I think they're supposed to be played, and while you can invest in them, you are gambling. It's just gambling. You can be smart about it. You can do everything right, but at the end of the day, it does come down to luck. We're going to look at some examples here where we see that guitars have gone up in value based on complete outside sources, things that you cannot control. But at the same time, those outside sources can dramatically lower the value of a guitar. It's purely luck in some cases. So let's take a look, and because it is interesting. So let's start with a guitar here that you can absolutely call a good investment. This is an Epiphone Les Paul from the 1990s. Now, if you wanted to buy one of these, it would probably set you back between about $350, maybe $400 at a max. But this one It sold for £132,000. That's 165,000 US dollars. And I played it. I had that guitar in this house because it used to be owned by Lawrence Carpenter from Rock Solid Investments. That's an investment company that specializes in music memorabilia. I've had a few of those guitars on this channel. I played Kirk Hammett's Gibson Les Paul that he used for recording on the Black Album. And I had a guitar that was played by Jimmy Page as well. These were guitars that were bought as investments, and very clearly they can be very good investments. But what's interesting about that is the value is not in the guitar. Like I said, if you wanted to buy one of those Epiphone Les Pauls, be about $400 max. That guitar sold for $165,000. Now, why did it do that? It's because it was owned by Noel Gallagher from Oasis. And again, like I mentioned, you can be smart about things. Outside forces can increase the value of goods, because if Lawrence had sold that guitar a couple of months prior, he absolutely wouldn't have gotten nearly as much. The highest estimate for that Epiphone was £80,000. It sold for £132,000. So for one, that kind of illustrates that no one really knows the value of these guitars, because that was the highest estimate and it soared above that. It's really just how much someone's willing to pay. And that guitar was auctioned just after Oasis had announced a reunion, first time in years. So it upped the value of the guitar. It upped the interest in the band, and it upped the interest in the guitar and the overall price that it went for. So it's an example there that's a great investment. But again, it had very little to do with the guitar, and that's showcased because there was another guitar sold from that. This is another guitar that sold on the same day. This is a Gibson Flying V that was also owned by Noel Gallagher and used to record with. And I played this one too. In fact, I do have a video of this one. And this as a guitar is worth way more than the Epiphone Les Paul that we saw, so you would think that it would go for more, right? Well, the Epiphone sold for $165,000 US dollars. The Flying V sold for $45,000 US dollars. The reason is because the Epiphone was featured in a music video, the Flying V was just on a recording. So even though the Flying V on its own as a guitar has more value than the Epiphone, that's not where the value is at all. You know, you can have a serial number, one less, you're losing thousands. It's about who owned it, who played it, and what they used it for. That's where the value is, because it's only a value to a certain person, a fan who wants that instrument because it was used on those certain tracks, certain videos by a certain person. So when people talk about guitars being financial investments, that's really the best financial investment that I can think of, the artist-owned instrument. But it's always a gamble. Outside forces change things, because it depends on how many people like that artist, for one, and it also depends on how many of them are out there. I mean, a great example of oversaturated the market with artist-owned and played instruments is Kiss, because they play an instrument per song and then sell each one every gig. So, I mean, they're pumping the market full of guitars, they're making a lot of money, but the resale on those, I can't say it's going to be anywhere close to, you know, something like that Epiphone. Let's talk about a bad financial investment when it comes to guitars. Custom guitars. This one is kind of self-explanatory, although I still see people kind of complain about it when their custom guitars don't sell for anywhere close to what they paid for them on the second-hand market. A custom one-of-a-kind guitar is for a one-of-a-kind person. And that means that the second-hand market, you've got a very small group of people that'll be interested in a guitar that you've spec'd out. And even if you pick the plain Jane options and use that on, basically it's a production guitar at a custom shop level, that's still not going to help your chances much on getting your money back. You are going to make a loss on a custom guitar because you have to price yourself lower, because even if your specs appeal to people and it's like 95% of exactly what they'd like, what's to stop them from just ordering a custom guitar to their 100% specs? It's going to be the price. You are going to have to price the guitar lower. You are not going to make your money back. You are going to lose money on a custom guitar. Buy those as an instrument. Buy them to play. Don't buy them as financial investments, really. It's Now, the next category can be a good investment or it can be a terrible investment. Again, a complete gamble. Signature guitars. Signature guitars tend to be made in lower production quantities. That's kind of generalizing. Some are made in higher quantities, but some, or a lot, are made in lower quantities than just their standard production guitar. And with that, they can have some different specs as well. And it really does depend on the artist. It depends. Sometimes endorsement deals don't last particularly long with a certain brand, and then those guitars become sought after. It's really about sought after. And it's not really much to do with the guitar. Like I said, it's outside forces. For example, I'll give you an example of a guitar that I have that you could class as a good investment. I've shown this one off a lot recently in a couple of recent videos, but this is a Jackson RR24. And I bought this guitar a few years ago for €550. I'm going to show you a reverb listing, a couple for this guitar. Here's one for $3,000, here's one for $3,351. So yes, not only have I beaten inflation, it's not just held its value, it's gone up. But it went up for outside reasons. The first one is that while this isn't a signature guitar, it is associated with an artist. This is the colour and kind of general specs of Alexi Laiho from Children of Bodom. Now, this guitar was never used by him, it was never endorsed by him, but because it kind of looks like the one that he used, there is a level of desire from fans of the band and fans of Alexi. And also, it probably also has something to do, however morbid it may be, with after Alexi passed, these guitars probably became more sought after then as well. By the way, this guitar is not for sale. But another reason, this is a Jackson that's made in Japan. Jackson stopped making made-in-Japan guitars pretty soon after this guitar and have only just recently started. And if you want to buy them, I think they come in starting at over $2,000. So because it's a made-in-Japan guitar, this is already, it comes in at over $2,000 just from the get-go. So I think it's fair to say that if I was buying that to sell it, and I would make a profit on selling it, that would be classified as a good investment. However, outside forces can change anything. I'm fully aware that Jackson could reissue that guitar at any time and it would lower the price. It would lower the demand because the supply was increased. So, a complete gamble if I was planning to sell it, which I'm not, but a complete gamble. And it's also worth mentioning that just because it's a signature model or just because it's made in a specific place that is not made anymore, that doesn't necessarily increase the value either. For example, this is a guitar, this is a signature model from Mark Morton from Lamb of God, and it's a model that Jackson don't make anymore, a shape that Jackson do not make anymore. It's made in Japan, and it's not worth anywhere close to what that RR24 is worth. This one I actually am going to put up for sale relatively soon. I have to do a listing of it, but I'm not expecting to make money. I would be very lucky to break even on this. So it's all about demand. I don't think there's a huge demand for these, but then again, they are kind of rare. We're talking about signature guitars and association with artists. It really does depend on how many people like the artist, and if the artist does something to cause dislike. For example, an ex-Black Label Society guitar player, Nick Catanese, he had signature guitars from PRS and Washburn, and even like custom shop Washburn guitars were on sale. Then he went and did something which meant that his signature guitars no longer had the allure that they once did. The specs might be perfect for someone, but the association to a name is an important one. And I don't have an example of it, I think it did sell, but just the other day, there was a Washburn custom shop signature guitar of his that was up for $1,300. Washburn custom shops do not go at that price, but it's because the association of the artist. So that's an outside thing that you cannot control that will lower the value of your guitar on the resale market. Just like things can make them go up, they can go down. It's all a gamble. Please remember that. I really don't think guitars should be investments. Now, I think roughly the final category that we should talk about is vintage equipment. Vintage guitars, from what I've seen, can tend to hold their value. They can. With that said, it depends on the instrument, and it also depends on outside factors. For example, if an artist starts using that specific thing, then interest will go up. People will want them. But it's also all supply and demand. And a reissue can absolutely destroy the secondhand market as an investment. For example, I'll actually show you this. This is a 1984 Mesa Boogie Mark II C+. Now, this amplifier was made popular by its use by Metallica. And again, it's an outside force. You're seeing a trend here. An outside force that is increasing the price of something not based on the specs, not based on the sound. It's based off someone else's input, an artist. So it's kind of a signature almost, or it's at least artist related. Now, on this particular listing you're seeing, it was initially going for, or being asked for, $14,000. They've dropped $4,000. It's now asking 10. I don't even think it's going to get that. And that's not because that's a crazy price, which it is, because people have paid those crazy prices. There's an example from just last year. Someone bought for $11,500 on Reverb. That was a sale made. So it's not that people aren't willing to pay that. It's that this amplifier has just had a reissue introduced. A reissue for significantly less than buying one of the older ones. The supply has gone up, so the demand for one of those original units is going to go down. That's just how it works. So it could have been a great investment a year ago. Now it's not. And those things, they can change at any time. It's such a volatile market. It's a gamble. I keep saying it. You are gambling here if you think that instruments are investments. Now, at this point, someone's probably going to say, but what about Trogley? He's an example of someone who buys guitars, sells them, and makes a profit. It's a good investment. Yeah, but Trogley is very different from your average Joe. For those that don't know, Trogley is a YouTuber with over 300,000 subscribers who flips guitars. He buys them, he does a little video about them, and then puts them up for sale. But I think it would be remiss from acknowledging that Trogley is essentially selling to a fan base. Nothing encapsulates this more other than the recent listing on his website for a used endoscope. Interesting. But that's something that you can buy on AliExpress for about 16 quid. He's selling it for $125 because he signed it. That kind of illustrates two things. One, the Trogley markup, and two, he's selling to a fan base. And that's kind of an acknowledgement of that. That's the only reason that someone would buy that. It's the only reason that he sells guitars so quickly and at such a large markup. The reality is the average Joe is not going to be Trogley. They're much more likely to get an offer from Trogley in their Reverb DMs. That's more likely to happen. If you ask me, I just don't think that guitars should be considered as investments. It's such a volatile market, and it's just, it takes the fun away from playing guitar. If you're thinking about selling it before you've even bought it, don't buy it. That's not the guitar for you. You should be buying a guitar that you don't want to sell. That's kind of where the optimum thing is. And I know circumstances change and people think about selling it for the reality aspect of it, but you should really kind of think about buying the guitar as a guitar, not as an investment. Because in most cases, you will lose money on the resale. I'll give you a great example of sucking the fun out of just kind of guitars. I did a review of this. This is a Vola guitar. And at the time, Vola had just announced that they were going direct to customer, so their prices had been lowered. And I was saying, hey, this is great. You can get a good guitar for less money. That's good. But I remember at the time there were some comments from people who owned Volas who were kind of annoyed because their guitars were now going down in value on the second-hand market because the guitars had lowered in price. And it's like, but it's not an investment. It's a guitar. Guitars are guitars. Investments in fun, investments in playing music, that's what I think they should be for. And once you get into the financial aspect, you're just kind of inviting misery into your life with that one. Enjoy your guitars. If you are buying them as investments, just know all the risks, because there are a lot. There are a lot of outside things that can change the value of a guitar, change the resale. And personally, I just recommend buying a guitar that you're going to play. That's kind of what they're there for. That's the video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like the video and maybe consider subscribing. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll see other videos. So, yeah. All right. Bye-bye.